My name is Tess Williams, and for my Math Manipulatives presentation looking at tangible and virtual resources that can be used in math classrooms, I chose to look at snap cubes for the tangible resource and tangrams for the virtual resource. So moving on to my first slide, looking at my tangible manipulative of snap cubes, they are developmentally appropriate for pre-kindergarten to 6th grade skill levels. There are various concepts that can be taught with this resource, including counting, following directions, geometry, looking for patterns, non-standard measurement, and sorting. So looking at what I would do for a mini lesson, I actually referred to something that I've done in my classroom recently. We did a lesson plan on fairy tales that just happened to involve an activity that incorporated non-standard measurement. We used the story Rapunzel, which is actually also a great multicultural book. It's a board book, so it's very resilient and it's perfect for younger children. So we took the snap cubes and used it to measure different lengths of yarn that were braided like Rapunzel's hair. Now these pictures are actually examples from the classroom. We use shorter lengths of cubes, longer lengths of cubes, just to give kids sort of a fun and engaging and non-standard way to practice using these snap cubes for non-standard measurement. So moving on to the standards met by this activity, I looked at different grades, pre-K through 1st grade. So in pre-kindergarten, it could help students learn to describe and compare measurable attributes of length and weight of everyday objects. In kindergarten, it could help students to describe and compare attributes of length, area, weight, and the capacity of everyday objects. And in 1st grade, students could learn to order lengths and measure them both indirectly and by repeating length units. So moving on to my virtual manipulative of tangrams. A tangram is a puzzle that has 2 big triangles, 1 medium triangle, 2 small triangles, 1 square, and 1 parallelogram. There are various concepts that can be taught with tangrams, including problem solving, which would involve putting pieces together to create a picture, geometric thinking, combining shapes, which would be appropriate for younger students such as pre-kindergarten, and spatial reasoning such as rotating puzzle pieces. This is developmentally appropriate for students from about ages 5 to 16. That's the prime age to enjoy using tangrams. It can be enjoyed past this age, of course. Often at this point, the puzzles are more challenging. So looking at what I would do for a mini lesson. When I looked at the National Manipulatives Library, I couldn't really get this resource to open on my computer. So I just looked up the basic idea for the tangrams and then looked at other resources that had virtual options for this resource. So Class Playground is the site that I'm going to reference here. They have interactive tangram puzzles and pieces. You can use them in a variety of ways. It actually links to a site called Toy Theater for the puzzles. As you can see, it could be used for pre-kindergarten students for more basic things, such as just creating squares out of triangles, or for students that are either more advanced or a little bit older. They could actually look at these images and copy the puzzles. As you can see, I chose to copy the one that looked like a rocket just by putting the various shapes in the same location as they have in this image. So this really could be developmentally appropriate for a variety of ages and grades. Moving on to my next slide, looking at standards that are met by this activity. I also chose again here to look at pre-kindergarten through 1st grade skills. Starting with pre-kindergarten, students could learn to identify and describe shapes, and they could also learn to analyze, compare, create, and compose shapes. Looking at the kindergarten standards, they could learn to identify and describe 2- and 3-dimensional shapes, and they could also analyze, compare, create, and compose 2- and 3-dimensional shapes. So moving on to a little more advanced skills in 1st grade, they could learn to compose and distinguish between 2- and 3-dimensional shapes based on their attributes. And this is all the information I included in my presentation for both tangible and virtual manipulatives that could be used in the math classroom.